everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk presented by Forefathers Organics. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for the Batavia Daily and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all the comings and goings from Orchard Park, thanks to our friends at Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, before we get to discussions with the Joes, Joe Buscaglia and Joe Marino, want to first update some storylines that we learned during today's day of practice, Friday in Orchard Park. The Bills with just one All-Pro this season, and it's a second-teamer. Josh Allen earns the second-team nod. Lamar Jackson beating him out for the first-team honor. Deion Dawkins finished third in the voting at his position. Christian Benford was the only other player to receive a first-place vote. The Bills will likely use the slim pickings on the All-Pro roster as motivation, along with a bunch of Pro Bowl snubs that went their way this season. We talked with Christian Benford after practice. He played it down, but he also said the tape speaks for itself when it comes to his performance this season. And if you also look at the statistics, the amount of yardage that he's allowing, the receptions that he's allowing this season, it's just been incredible, matching right up there with Patrick Surtain of the Denver Broncos, considered one of the top cornerbacks in the league. If you look at the numbers, they're really not too far off, but Christian Benford, just one first-place vote. Deion Dawkins, I believe, received 8 first-place votes, if I'm not mistaken. Greg Rousseau, no votes. Taron Johnson, I believe, received 1 second-place vote. So a lot of snubbery to go around amongst the Bills locker room this season between the Pro Bowl and the All-Pro nominations. So, like I said, I'm sure they'll use that as motivation and some bulletin board material as they enter this matchup against the Broncos, which they're favored pretty heavily. So they'll need all the motivation they can get in this one. I'd really like to know Deion Dawkins' thoughts on him being snubbed from the Pro Bowl. Christian Benford, a much more mild-mannered, not as outspoken as Deion Dawkins, much more tempered in his remarks to the media. I would have liked to speak with Deion Dawkins today and gotten his reaction. We spoke with him on Thursday, and usually you don't speak with the player 2 days in a row. He also had some national media obligations to tend to today. But I thought he had the best chance, other than Josh Allen, to earn perhaps first team or even second team nod. But not to be so for Deion Dawkins, nor Christian Benford, or the rest of the lot. Josh Allen, the only All-Pro, the second team All-Pro this season. And that All-Pro team that was released today is different from the NFLPA's All-Pro team, which was released earlier in the week. That voted on by the players. This voted on by the AP writers, who also make up a large share of the MVP voters. So that means Lamar Jackson must be considered the front runner for the MVP at this point. I know a lot of the sports books still have Josh Allen favored, but if you look at Polymarket, something that follows the trends rather than the betting market, it has Lamar Jackson about 65% to win the award now. And that's just a matter of fact, considering the AP voting, like I said, makes up a large share of the MVP voting. And it's unlikely that a lot of those voters are going to show nuance and change their vote when it comes to All-Pro and MVP. I think a lot of people would like to see them do so. A lot of that has been discussed when it comes to offensive, defensive player of the year and MVP. Who's the best player at that position and who's the most valuable. And I think that's the distinction that everyone is kind of fighting over between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen this year. But it's the same voters. Like I said, unlikely that a bunch of them are going to switch. The last time the first team All-Pro QB didn't win MVP was 2013. That was Adrian Peterson, a running back, claiming the award. And then in 2000, Peyton Manning was the first team All-Pro quarterback, but he shared MVP honors with Steve McNair. So it's not very often where you see that first team All-Pro quarterback not claim MVP honors, but we'll still have to see how the voting turns out. We have Go Buffalo with a few comments. I need someone to explain to me why Lamar has more MVPs than Montana and Mahomes. And I think it's simple to say it's a stat-driven award, and Lamar's stats with his rushing and his passing, I think, have obviously been the difference over the past couple of years. This is absolutely absurd. Montana had 3 first-team All-Pros in his entire career. Again, explain to me how Lamar has more MVPs than Montana. Like I said, I think it comes down to the rushing. The dual threat ability really makes Jackson stick out when it comes to today's day and age quarterback. Patrick Mahomes claimed the award last year, just a phenomenal season. Josh Allen, a phenomenal season this year. But Lamar, his stats are a little bit better than Josh Allen. So I think that's what the voters are seeing when it comes to that All-Pro. And like I said, we'll see how that MVP voting shakes out in a few weeks at the the NFL honors. All right, before our conversations with Joe and Joe, let's check the injury report for the Bills, which will take all of about a minute. Just one player listed questionable entering this game against the Broncos, and that is kick punt returner Brandon Codrington. And boy, does that spell good news for the Bills entering this postseason as healthy as they've been in recent memory. Just a kick punt returner. I was joking with one of my colleagues watching practice on Thursday. It must be a good sign for the Bills if we're all focused on Brandon Codrington during practice. So that just goes to show the injury luck, I guess, that they've had this season. But I guess it's been more than luck. These past 2 years, they've remained relatively healthy, especially with that offensive line. But this year, entering the playoffs, really fully intact up and down the roster. Codrington, as John Robert asks, how is Brandon Codrington? He was limited again today, listed as questionable. We were only able to watch the stretching portion of today's practice. I'm not so sure he's going to go. It's a hamstring injury. Usually the nature of those injuries, it takes a little bit longer for those players to overcome those injuries. And the Bills have shown a tendency to take those injuries slow. I know it's the postseason. They're going to try to get him out there, but I'm not sure they'll want it to linger if they are to get past this round. He's played a big role for the Bills this season. I mentioned it on a previous podcast, Sal Capaccio pointing out on X that Brandon Codrington, number 1 in punt return average, and he's helped the Bills achieve number 4 in the league in terms of average starting field position. So that'll be a bigger loss than I think a lot of people are giving credence to. It'll be KJ Hamler, Khalil Shakir, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, all vying for punt/kick return duties. You'll see Hamler or Shakir as the punt returner, and you'll likely see Johnson and Davis share those kick return duties. That is, if Brandon Codrington can't go. For my money, it's going to be Khalil Shakir as the punt returner. I think that's the safe bet, and I think at this point of the season, you go with safety. All right, before we get to Joe and Joe, let us thank our sponsor here on Right Here, Right Now, Forefathers Organics in Dansville. At Forefathers Organics, their mission is to liberate, educate, and innovate with the highest quality CBD and hemp-derived products for your mind, body, and soul so you can live happy and free. Visit them at 87 Franklin Street in Dansville, online at forefathersorganics.com, or call them at 585-335-2223 to learn more about the products they offer. All right, without further ado, we welcome in Joe Buscaglia, my conversation with Joe from today. All right, here with Joe Buscaglia of The Athletic. Very grateful for him to join us during what is a busy week for us all on the beat here in Orchard Park. Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Alex. Thanks for having me, man.
You got it. You came out with a story this morning on Sean McDermott, really profiling the Bills head coach, going into the changes he's made this season. Could you give the listeners maybe a preview of that without giving too much away so they can go to The Athletic and check that out?
I appreciate you bringing it up. Sean McDermott, I know just speaking from a media perspective, and you can speak to this as well. this year and even a little bit into last year, but mostly this year, it just seems like he's like his shoulders might have been uptight earlier in his career, and now it's just like he's just there. And me wanting to figure out why that is. And so that's exactly what I set out to do. I'm very grateful for Sean McDermott for giving me the amount of time that I took up of his to kind of dig into his story a little bit, but it's a little bit of evolving as a coach. There's some personal life things that he had to realize. There's a personal life experience that he had to go through, that he went through, that I think has dramatically shifted just the type of player that he is. And also part of it is to figuring out what each specific team each year needs from a head coach. And, to his credit early on, even though he was very robotic and stressed work ethic process, everything like that early on in his career. And I had a front row seat for it for Sean McDermott when he arrived in 2017. The team needed that back then because they were just coming off the Rex Ryan era. And after covering the Rex Ryan era, the way that I'll describe it to people is I don't know how that was 2 years of my life, of my professional life. It was just a circus, one week after the other. And there was a lack of accountability. There was a lack of structure. And I think McDermott was kind of like the right person for the right time of the right job. And that's why he had some success. But what he's found out, and that, as the years have gone on, the team has evolved. So he has had to evolve, and he's had to find himself within of what that leadership defines for that version of the specific Bills team. So it was a really interesting look into his brain. Found out some very interesting things from team meetings that are pretty funny. So yeah, all of that is over there at The Athletic, and I appreciate you for bringing it up.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, we've all seen the video of the snow angel he did with Josh Allen. Josh Allen brought up the dad jokes that Sean McDermott is bringing up in team meetings this year. And you mentioned Rex Ryan. It's funny how he said while campaigning for the Jets job, said that he's going to get rid of the country club mentality down there in New York. Well, that's pretty much what it was up here in Buffalo when he was the head coach. So I'm not really sure.
Look, man, there are so many stories from those 2 years, and the fact that it was only 2 years and there are that many stories, like we could go for hours.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to get you back after the season for a postseason pod. We'll go Rex Ryan era talk.
Oh, boy.
But let's dive into the defense here. We have Joe Marino coming up later in this episode. We're going to ask him about the offense. I figured we'd ask you about the defense. What should we expect from Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard during the postseason? I know you really dove into Matt Milano's season and his progression back from the injury. And I'm not sure we're getting vintage Matt Milano this year. I believe the instincts are still there. Maybe he's lost a step. But what do you expect that we can see from Milano and Bernard? Because I think if the Bills are going to go on a run here, they need that linebacker duo to turn into something special, as they were expecting it to at the outset of the season.
Yeah, no doubt, because when one of their biggest deficiencies this year has been consistently defending the run. Like, they've been really good in spots against Seattle. That was that was their top of the top defensive performance in terms of run defending, because they completely shut Kenneth Walker III down.
And that's a running back who went for 100 yards against this Denver defense.
Exactly. So Kenneth Walker III, they anticipated how he was going to try to operate, and they shut him down, and they did a great job of that. I will say the Detroit Lions early on in that game, when Milano was still in the game, which is why the Milano point is important, the two Lions running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, before Milano had left, they only combined for 45 yards on 13 carries. So like there's a piece of this where Milano is really important, because they need to help cover up some of the deficiencies of the defensive tackle group in front of them, and in smaller part, the defensive ends, because not all of them are great at edge contain. Like AJ Epinesa has been a work in progress with that his entire career. Rousseau is really good at it. Smoot is here or there. Von Miller's not that great at it. So you need your linebackers to overcome some of this stuff and to clear out and be able to get off blocks and read the plays through traffic. It's not an easy job. That's why it's a criminally undervalued position, in my opinion. But with Milano and Bernard, what I have seen from, I'll start with Bernard and then we'll really get into Milano. What I've seen from Bernard has been, just like average play, needs to get off blocks at a lot better rate than he has this year. And he doesn't have those flash plays that buoyed him last year. Like, this was part of my critique of him last year too, to where, he had a great season in terms of those big plays and those big moments, but it was the down in, down out stuff where I'm like, okay, I think he needs to progress a little bit. And I haven't seen as much as you would have liked to this year, but he's been solid. Milano, I think, is what could take this defense and make it into not a strength, but a team that can help get them off the field often enough to set the tone for the offense to take over the game. Milano, to me, his first game was not good against the 49ers, but what can you expect? 16 months of rust. He's coming off 2 significant injuries. I mean, I think for the career that he's had, if anyone deserves a pass, it's him for that, going through what he's gone through. Started off against the Rams game, was not great. Everyone remembers the jump cut by Blake Corum that kind of left Milano in the dust. But the thing about that play is he also read it, and he was right there. And that's something that the Bills haven't gotten consistently from their linebackers this year. But later in that game, Milano really took a step forward. Against the Lions before he got hurt, I thought he was having a really strong game. And then against the Jets, that was his best game so far. Those are the only 4 games we have to go by. It's the instincts that are still there, clear as day. He is seeing plays develop before they happen. And that's something that Terrell Bernard doesn't have as much. It's something certainly that Dorian Williams doesn't have, even though he makes some flash plays here or there. And Milano puts himself in those positions. But the big question is what you brought up. Is he quick enough to be able to make those vintage Matt Milano plays happen, where he's the only guy that reads the play and he's the only one that can make the play? And in past years, he did make that play, and there was a huge loss for what could have been a huge gain for the offense. Can he regain that quarter, half step that we're talking about by just going through more reps and getting more acclimated to the game from that long layoff? That's the big question. But in terms of instincts, recognition, he's top notch, and that's why he deserves to be on the field over someone like Dorian Williams, who really lacks in that area. Yeah,
I posted it yesterday. It's got to be a happy sight for Bobby Babich seeing Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard on the field together to begin the postseason. In his first year as defensive coordinator, just the veteran presence of Milano and the steady hand of Bernard. You like what you've seen from Dorian Williams, but like you said, there's been too much inconsistency, I think, there to trust him come postseason time, although we might see them mix in some 3 linebacker sets a little bit more often here down the stretch to help stop the run. We'll see how that goes. But let's talk about the back end. How about Rasul? I'll ask you a 2-pronged question. How about Rasul Douglas? What have you seen from him in your evaluation? It seems like he's taken a step back since he came over from Green Bay last season. Had a really nice season last year, but maybe a minor step back this year. And then at the safety position, Sean McDermott left the door open for Cole Bishop to earn more of a significant role, even with DeMar Hamlin returning. He announced that DeMar Hamlin will be the starter, but do you think Bishop might filter in a little bit at that position? They've really gone with just the 2 starters and not done that. But I guess 2-pronged question. First, what have you seen from Rasul Douglas? And second, do you think Cole Bishop may be in line for a more significant role as that 3rd safety? Yeah,
Douglas, to me, has done a lot of the same things he did last year, only without the picks this year. And he does have some deficiencies as a cover corner. Like, man coverage is not his thing. And zone is where he's at. But when he's forced to go into man, then he can at least hold his own, which is what you need out of zone-based cover corners. So he's been fine. He's been like above average to me. I don't think he's been like a weakness or anything along those lines. I think the drop off from him to Kaiir Elam is a massive one. And should there be an injury, it has led me to question whether or not Elam based on what he showed against the Patriots and the game prior that Rasul Douglas was not available for, as to whether or not he would be the one that they would start or whether or not they would have it be Jamarcus Ingram. There's a legitimate question about that heading into the postseason. But Douglas, to me, I think he's been relatively solid, good tackler, which is what you need out of that position too on the outside. Would like his recognition just to be a touch better on those run plays, but you can't really ask for much more of a good tackling, big, long-armed cover corner who can help you out in that capacity. And if he guesses right, which he likes to guess, I would not rule out him making a big play or two in this postseason. So Douglas, to me, is someone who can definitely rise as the playoffs go on here. Especially with the motivation of the fact that he's a free agent at the end of the year. As far as the safety position goes, I was very interested by what McDermott said to your question a couple weeks ago about Cole Bishop and just leaving the door open, because he doesn't do that. He will, especially this year, if we're talking about McDermott being looser and more open, he has been very quick to, these guys will start. In past years, it was like, we're still evaluating, but this year it's like, he's going to start. But with the safety position, I think there is a lot of Sean McDermott that has to do with loyalty. Now, that's not to say that he will take that loyalty and defy logic with it. But Damar Hamlin has got them there the whole length of the season. And for him to get injured and then to lose his job just before the postseason, especially with how popular Damar Hamlin is in that locker room, I think there are just more dynamics at play than Hamlin not being as good as Cole Bishop. Bishop has been a better safety, in my opinion, and he's got a higher ceiling, but he also has these, the volatility factor that is just a bit greater than with Damar. And the reason why Damar has been solid for them is because he's safe. Like, they know he's going to be where he's supposed to be. He knows the defense like the back of his hand and everything along those lines, but he doesn't take a ton of chances. No. And that's where the safety play in the past years with Poyer and with Micah Hyde, where they could read the play, get there, and then make these outstanding plays, game-changing plays. You're just not getting those with Damar Hamlin. So it's a kind of a balancing act. Do you want safe and someone who's been in the starting lineup all year, or do you want someone with a little bit more volatility that could give you a potentially higher ceiling? I'm more of an aggressive type of decision maker, so I would probably veer Cole Bishop, but I understand the dynamics at play, and that's probably why we're going to see Damar Hamlin start. I would not be surprised if Cole Bishop works in should Damar struggle, but I'm not. They haven't really staggered their safety position before, and I'm not sure that they're going to start.
Yeah, I think the best case for Cole Bishop is how reliant this defense has been on takeaways this season. They've struggled to get off the field on third down, and those takeaways have really turned the tide in some of these games. And while you can't rely on those during the postseason, filtering Cole Bishop in there and just mixing things up, and like you said, his aggressive nature may just cause some havoc to be wreaked on the Bills' defensive side of things. But last question on the defense, the defensive line. Greg Rousseau has really been leading that unit all season, but it feels like the Bills need Ed Oliver to go sicko mode this postseason if they hope to go on a Super Bowl run. And we talked with him yesterday, and he seems as focused as ever, seemed to ramp up his production as the season went on, especially late in the year. What's helped him turn things around lately, at least from my perspective, and what are you forecasting from him come playoff time?
Yeah, I was right there in that scrum, and my biggest takeaway of that was like an eyebrow raise, like, oh, Ed's pissed.
Yeah.
Like he's ready to go here. And when Ed Oliver is in that type of mode, then you might be getting your best Ed Oliver coming up, because I remember, was it before the Lions game? I think it was that we all chatted with him. And
I believe so. And I think that was his first really solid game.
Yeah, that was a big standout game for him where he made some flash plays. And I think McDermott, even the Monday after, was like, hey, could you piss him off every week or something along those lines? But Ed Oliver, to me, he has all the potential. This has been his worst season so far with the Bills. And, those that have read my work over the years have known how highly I have talked about Ed Oliver and what he does for the team. That goes totally unnoticed, but a lot of those unnoticed things aren't there as consistent this year. And that's what you want to see above all else. The flash plays are great. Don't get me wrong. And that's what takes his season from great to spectacular. But right now he's playing at an above average level. So he's not like he's a liability or anything along those lines, but it's just something that you can get more out of him. He's in the prime of his career. They're in the postseason. They desperately need this type of play from him. And he's got a pretty good matchup coming up if he lines up against the center, Wattenberg, for the Broncos. So to me, I think this could set the table for Oliver doing a little bit more. And because the Broncos aren't exactly a great rushing team this year, and they're not a great run blocking unit this year, I think there's an area there because Nix gets the ball out of his hand pretty quickly. So it might be the run defending piece that could become the thing for Ed Oliver this week for him to stand out.
Yeah, and I think that would help really set the linebackers free and help Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard impact the game a little bit more as well. And you need more from Daquan Jones as well. It seems like he was a wash player midway through the year. He's come on a little bit as the season has progressed, but I think you need more from both of those interior defensive linemen. Joe, last question. You've been around this team a long time.
Don't make me sound old.
not as long as some of our colleagues on the beat who will be left unnamed here, but is this the best team you've seen during your time covering the Bills, and do you think they're good enough to win the Super Bowl?
Are they the best team? Are they the most talented team? No. I think 2 or 3 years ago, they were more talented. Are they the team with the best circumstances heading into the postseason? I think, yeah, because not only do they just have zero questions about it, literally look up and down their roster right now. They have no questions about them.
Right.
I mean, one of the huge questions, and hindsight 2020, last year, we probably should have had a good idea that they weren't going to win the whole thing last year because they fired their offensive coordinator midway through the year. They went through some real offensive strife and trying to figure things out. Josh Allen was trying to figure things out on the fly, even after Joe Brady took over.
Right.
So that's a hindsight thing. This year, there's none of that. Like they don't have as much talent on that side of the ball in terms of their skill players, but they are making it go. They are balanced. They have done a little bit of everything. The offensive line, and I will say this, and I've been saying this all year, this is the best offensive line that Josh Allen has ever had, and it's not even close. Yeah. And they are the engine of what they do, leaps and bounds. So from that perspective, the offense is going to be what leads this team to wherever they need to go. No injuries right now, heading into the postseason, remarkably healthy. The team is loose. There's no real questions about them. They've got a pretty ideal path in terms of 2 home games at least heading into the postseason. There's just a lot of things going on. And, even their losses, they've only got 1 bad loss all year. And that was way back in week 4. The other 2, I don't count the Patriots one. The other 2 were close and they were right in it right till the end, even though they were horrible for a lot of the Texans game, but they were right in it at the end. So yeah, I think this team does have a chance to win it all this year. And I think their circumstance is certainly one of the strongest that we've seen in the Sean McDermott era.
Yeah, let's hope for Bills fans' sake that they're not saving that bad loss for the wild card round, because if they fall to the Broncos this weekend, boy, oh boy, the city might be ablaze with Sean McDermott's feet directly at the fire. But Joe, thank you for joining me. And do you have anything else that you're working on at The Athletic other than that great Sean McDermott piece you came out with this morning?
Well, thank you for saying that again. No, just my normal notebook where I'm digging into Bo Nix and what he does against different coverages and specifically the coverages that the Bills like to play and how they like to play it. And I think there's some pretty interesting things in there. So that'll come out later today.
All right, Joe, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you later today.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. Want to thank Joe for joining us earlier this afternoon before Bills practice. Check out his podcast, The Buffalo Beat, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, like I mentioned during our discussion, that Sean McDermott profile on The Athletic, a lot of good information there in terms of things that the Bills head coach is doing differently this year, things that are working in terms of his evolution as a leader for this franchise. Before we get to our conversation with Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast, once again, we'll bring up one of the topics of this podcast in Mexico Marty. Awards are nice, but ultimately a career footnote. Josh is only driven by one thing, a Super Bowl ring, and Bills Mafia should do the same. And I think a lot of that rings true, Marty, but when you've had a season like Josh Allen has had, and you're a team like the Bills where these MVPs don't come around very often. Obviously, Thurman Thomas back in the day, the great Hall of Fame running back, but you want your quarterback to be crowned. And I think that is why Bills Mafia is so rabidly chasing after this MVP trophy for Josh Allen. And not only that, you've heard Sean McDermott be outspoken about it, say he believes that Josh Allen is the MVP. So, and the media for that matter, a lot rallying around this discussion. And I think it just comes down to you want that check mark in the box on what is expected to be a Hall of Fame career for Josh Allen. Yes, he still needs that postseason success. Who knows? It could come this year. But also what you need is that individual success if you hope to achieve that Hall of Fame status. And an MVP can go a long way to making that happen. But your point is very well taken. I think if Lamar Jackson is to win the MVP this year and Josh Allen is left out in the cold as he was in the All-Pro voting, the ultimate solace is winning a Super Bowl. And I think that would erase even any thought of the MVP from not only Bills fans, but also Josh Allen's mind as well if they're able to claim that Super Bowl title. A few more questions here. Do I think that the Bills will call anybody up? Yes, I think they will. The practice squad elevations reset in the playoffs. So Tyrell Shavers, he has a brand new slate along with anybody else who came up 3 times. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, yeah, I think they'll call somebody up as they have throughout the season. Those will come tomorrow by 4 p.m. That is Saturday by 4 p.m. So keep a lookout for that. But now we'll get to our conversation with Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. And full disclosure, I think I mentioned it at the top of our discussion. I was having some computer issues, specifically with my computer charger this morning. It crapped the bed on me, for lack of a better word. Right before I was about to go on with Joe, I was able to get a different cord after I left the house, but Joe, running a tight schedule, we had to get it done in the allotted time that we had. So the end of our conversation is cut short. I wasn't able to ask him the last question that I asked Joe, Joe Buscaglia, if he thinks that this is the Bills' best team under Sean McDermott and if they have a chance to win a Super Bowl. I would have liked to get Joe's perspective on that, but we were able to get his perspective and some analysis on the Bills' offense. So here's that conversation with Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills and Locked On Scouting podcast, also author of the Herd Mentality Substack. Did I get all that right, Joe? I think I may have left something out.
Oh, you got it. Just the NFL First Read podcast as well. Doing a lot of content, my guy.
Yeah, content king, Joe Marino. We'll get right to it. I'm dealing with a charger issue here, Joe. So hopefully we can get through this interview in the next 10, 15 minutes or so. We'll start this off. We'll primarily focus on the offense during this discussion. And Josh Allen, he's become much more efficient this year. The offensive line and its progression under offensive line coach Aaron Kromer has played a significant role in that. 14 sacks as opposed to 33 2 years ago. So the offensive line doing a really nice job. But Allen with just 6 interceptions this year as opposed to 15 a year ago. What has allowed Allen to become much more efficient beyond the offensive line's really upward trajectory here over the last few years?
Yeah, I think at the core of that is probably Joe Brady's imprints on this offense and working together with Josh to develop the scheme. But I think the leading variable is not having Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs, great football player. And I've said repeatedly, he's delivered this organization the greatest 4-year stretch in wide receiver production that it's ever seen and probably ever will. But they're a better team without Stephon Diggs. And the fact that Josh Allen can just play and not have to worry about 14, not have to worry about getting him his targets, not have to worry about his reactions to everything, it's allowed Josh Allen to play more free and play more smart. And I'll double down. I think it's more than just Stephon Diggs not being around. I think it's also Gabe Davis. Yeah. This team has been lying to itself for years that Gabe Davis was an actual number 2 receiver in the NFL. And I think that they tried very hard to validate that he is. And Gabe's a very limited player. He doesn't separate quick. He doesn't win after the catch. He doesn't win on the horizontal plane when running routes. He's literally just a size ball skills guy down the field. And that's great sometimes in a very small percentage of snaps. But, when that guy's supposed to be a volume player for your offense and he has the limited skill set that he does, on top of the drops, on top of the fumbles that Gabe Davis has had, it hurts your team. And so I think getting rid of those 2 players has allowed this offense to take a big step forward and lead to this efficient and, reduced mistakes version of Josh Allen. And so it's Joe Brady, and I think it's the overhauled wide receiver core.
We'll stick with the wide receiver core. Keon Coleman, up and down rookie season, has dealt with some injury. What should we expect from him postseason time? And was his rookie year, at least the regular season, a success in your mind?
I thought Keon Coleman had so much momentum before that wrist injury against Miami. It felt like it was really coming along. You're thinking, this is exactly why they wanted this guy to be their top pick. And then since the injury, I just don't think he's been the same. There's been some drops, and there were a few drops earlier in the season as well, but there were enough plays that made up for it where you can kind of live with it. But you've seen, even some issues where I don't feel like he's been as consistent with leveraging and positioning himself at the catch point to win. And so there's been a little bit more variance there. I wonder how the injury impacted things. And I think overall with his rookie season, though, I'm mostly encouraged. He's a player that I think had a very specific skill set with his ability to, be a ball winner in the air that's going to win leverage battles and, be very good in terms of scramble drill and those types of things. And I think he's made enough plays for me to be encouraged about where that's going to go. And I also think the amount of snaps he plays says a lot. The Bills don't give playing time away, right? They're not playing Keon Coleman because he was their top pick in the draft. They're playing Keon Coleman because they buy into the skill set, his understanding of the playbook, his chemistry with Josh Allen. And I think as a young player, for him to have the playing time that he has, for him to make the plays that he has, it says a lot for where things are going to go moving forward. And he's very young. And I think we should all be able to appreciate how this coaching staff has developed its talent throughout the years. And I think Keon's done enough in year 1 for us to be pretty excited about what year 3, year 2, year 3 can look like building off of this. So he's a rookie with variance. That's part of the deal. But I think I'm mostly encouraged based on what he's shown so far, in his rookie season. The playoffs are going to be interesting in terms of what type of impact he makes. I think this passing game is going to be a lot more centered around Khalil Shakir, a lot more centered around Dalton Kincaid and the running backs. And, I think anything that you get from those outside receivers is more of a bonus.
Yeah, you want to attack this Broncos defense with the running backs. I think they've given up a few touchdowns in the receiving game to running backs this season. So that might be something that Joe Brady dials up on Sunday. One more question about the pass catching core. Dalton Kincaid maybe struggled to find his footing a little bit in terms of satisfying the expectations that were set forth for him at the beginning of the season. People, including myself, projecting close to 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards, really sky-high expectations. Hasn't fulfilled those. He's been a solid player for them. He's also dealt with some injury. You said early in the season there was a lot of gravity going his way in terms of opposing defenses. Has that been the case all season? Do you think that's why his production's been limited in a sense?
Yeah, that was certainly the case earlier in the season. And I think you saw as it moved along, they tried to use Kincaid a little bit more down the field. And Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid just didn't have enough consistency with their chemistry down the field for them to make a lot of the plays that were there to be made. If you want to look at the production for Dalton Kincaid in his sophomore season, you're going to be disappointed, right? It didn't meet the thresholds that we were anticipating. I was expecting 120 targets and same with you, around 100 catches, that type of situation. But it didn't happen this year. And where I'm encouraged, though, is Dalton Kincaid's a really, really talented football player. Nothing about his skill set doesn't scream high production moving forward. I think it's just a matter of him settling into his role, him developing that chemistry with Josh Allen so that they can produce the numbers. So, no, the numbers weren't there, but the skill set is there, and I think that's where I get excited about what he can be, down the line.
How big of a factor do you think James Cook's development this season, particularly his nose for the end zone, is going to play come postseason time? We always hear about you have to run the ball in the playoffs. It gets colder come January, February. Sometimes that can be a little cliche, but I think for this offense specifically, the balance has really worked wonders for this year. And we talked about Josh Allen's efficiency, and I think that has also helped with his efficiency, just taking some off of him when in scoring range, and just the understanding that he has other players that are capable of finding the end zone, particularly in the running game. So I guess my question to you, like I said before, is how critical come postseason time is James Cook's factor into the offense?
Yeah, I think James Cook's probably the most improved player offensively for this team year over year. And James had a great season last year, 1,500 yards from scrimmage, a volume player. Like, I am not taking anything away from it. His stats were good. He's a better player this year. And I thought there were 4 significant growth areas for James Cook that needed to happen year over year, and I think he's taken off in 3 of them. One of them was short yardage. What type of ability does he have to grind out tough yards? Now, he's never going to be a very dynamic player post-contact, right? He's 5'11", 195 pounds. He's not built for, moving piles and running people over. That's not his game. But he's done enough. I think he's added a little bit of muscle mass, and he's done enough to make himself a better player in terms of how he approaches tacklers and how he doesn't offer surface area to give him a chance to win post-contact. He's been a much better post-contact runner this season. I think that's been a big reason why the touchdown production has been there. Even if it's not goal line carries, his ability to score from distance and break tackles along the way has been a big part of that touchdown production. I think number 2 is the drops, right? I mean, we watched last year. He dropped like 5 or 6 touchdown passes. He hasn't been perfect, but the drops have been significantly better this season. Number 3 is fumble.
I was just going to say that. The fumbles as well to go with the drops.
Right. And that was an issue last year. He's improved that. The Bills didn't lose a fumble all season from a running back or an offensive skill player, right? That's been a major growth area. The 4th area was pass protection. I don't think he's grown there, but I think that's probably okay because Ty Johnson has emerged in that role. So I think James has really improved, and I think the touchdown production is probably the biggest way that you can point to the evidence of that.
Yeah, we all remember James Cook's fumble issues against the Broncos last season. So
twice, yeah,
certainly going into this
first play of the game.
Yeah, it's good that he's gotten those figured out. All right, as I said, our conversation got cut short due to some computer issues. I wasn't able to send Joe merry on his way, but Joe is always very, very merry. Be sure to check out the Locked On Bills podcast and all the other content that Joe has going on. He really does a great job covering the Bills, and since he's really been going at it full time, it's really been a gift to Bills Mafia, waking up every day, listening to Joe, reading his Substack, hearing him on the radio, and the other scouting podcast that he does as well. So be sure to check out Joe's stuff at the Joe Marino on X. So I think that's going to do it for today's episode. About 45 minutes in, we're going to save the Broncos preview content for tomorrow. We'll have Benjamin Albright of KOA, I believe it is. The Broncos flagship out there in Denver. Benjamin will join us tomorrow. That is Saturday. So be sure to continue to check out this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube and right here on X and Facebook as well. Brought to you by the Batavia Daily News and, of course, Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, one final thought about the MVP conversation. I think what a lot of people are saying rings true in my mind. if you're going to give the MVP to the best player every year in terms of statistical performance, I think you need to change the name of the award. It's no longer the most valuable player. It's the best player award. And I don't think it's fair to Josh Allen to give it to Lamar Jackson with all the all-pros on the Ravens roster, the Pro Bowlers on the Ravens roster when you compare it to the Bills roster. It's just apples and oranges. And what Josh Allen has had to deal with this season, it's not as much making chicken salad out of you-know-what, but in a sense, it has been for Josh Allen. There's been so much turnover on this roster, not only in the receiving core, the pass-catching core, but also the offensive line, communication there. I'm sure it took a while to be ironed out. A new center being inputted into the starting lineup. So a lot to deal with for Josh Allen this year. And what he's responded with is one of the most historic performances we've ever seen from a Bills quarterback, breaking records seemingly week after week. And the great moments for Josh Allen, I've mentioned it several times on this podcast throughout this season. That's the difference for me with Josh Allen. The moments, diving in the snow, the run against the Chiefs, barreling across the goal line, and then putting up 40 points against the Detroit Lions. Just great moments for Josh Allen this season. And that, for me, seals the deal. He is the MVP in my eyes, but it doesn't seem as if he's going to be the MVP in the voters' eyes. I think we can all but kind of say goodbye to that possibility with the voting set forth by the All-Pro voters here today, being Friday. The voting for the MVP having already been cast, so there's no more time for Josh Allen to prove his case. It's all said and done, and a lot of the same voters who vote for MVP, as I said earlier, are those All-Pro voters. So I'm just not sure you're going to see Josh Allen overcome the long odds he's now facing, or maybe not odds, but Polymarket now giving him about a 35% chance to win the MVP. I know that betting markets out there may not have shifted. I've been on this podcast for a while, so not sure, but that really follows, like I said, the betting market, where Polymarket follows something much different. So that's going to do it officially for today's podcast. Big thanks to Joe Buscaglia and Joe Marino for joining us. And be sure to join us on Saturday. Benjamin Albright out there on the Denver's Broncos flagship station will join us for a deep dive into the Broncos, both offensively and defensively. And we'll preview the matchup here as well. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. If I can get the outro video here. A lot of computer issues today.